All right, we'll get started here. I want to welcome everybody to our webinar today, Building Secure Recoverable Infrastructure with Lightedge and VMware by Broadcom. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Get us started here. I'm going to introduce myself and let my colleagues introduce themselves. My name is Duncan Garcia. I'm the product manager for cloud here at Lightedge. I've been in the industry over 30 years, working predominantly with managed service providers and these technologies. And so very happy to be here to present the webinar for you today. And we'll turn it over to Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Duncan. It's nice to meet everyone. So my name is Derek Sampson, product manager for cybersecurity services. And I'm excited to kind of get started on this webinar. So I will pass over to Travis.
Hi, everybody. My name is Travis Ferrenti, and I run operations at Lightedge. I've been in the MSP space, cloud transformation space, and I've been leading teams and organizations through IT operational transformations for more years than I can count. Back to you, Duncan.
All right, thanks, guys. So we'll do a quick, brief introduction to our agenda today. We're going to first define cyber resilience for you, talk about hybrid infrastructure and the new perimeter, as we call it. We'll also discuss resilience and operational discipline, a key component. And then we'll round it out with building your cyber resilience roadmap. And we're also going to have some time for question and answers. So if you have any of those questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat space, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you at the conclusion of the presentation. All right, we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So defining cyber resilience. We've got our equation here. It's pretty straightforward. Business continuity plus security plus discipline equals cyber resilience. But what does that really mean? From a software point of view, you have your applications, your workloads, your data pipelines, all of the things that make up the software component. Put that on top of a hardened platform or infrastructure spanning, in our case, as a hybrid service provider, on-prem, co-location, and cloud. And this is really the foundation, the base for where everything else depends on. And then, of course, a component that we can't do any of this work without, which is the operations team, the people, the processes and playbooks, that human touch, and those folks are going to execute when systems and plans are tested. Derek, did you want to talk a little bit more about these three components here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you broke it down pretty in depth, Duncan, and I thought it was great. So I kind of just want to add to that, right? Because you mentioned a lot of, the security aspects, right, in the components between the software, the platform, and the operations, and how they do work together, to create a unified, secure environment, for the organization. And so, really that difference or that transition to go from a secure environment to a cyber resilient environment, that's where you get, that business continuity and the discipline included. So within each of those phases, the software aspect, the platform aspect, and the operations aspect, you want to make sure that with, you're including how can we keep business continuity up, right? In the event that something does happen, how can we keep the website or the organization running smooth while, the threat or the misconfiguration is resolved? Along with security controls to prevent that from happening. And then you also want to keep that discipline, right? User training, ensuring that we're locking our PC, for example, when we step away from the desk, and that the platform or that the software, those applications are built with disciplined coding, right? Efficient coding, effective coding. So it's really those three different pillars, right? The business continuity, the security aspect, and the discipline aspect. And you can include them in each phase, in the software, in the platform, and in the operations. And that will build a cyber resilient organization and an environment kind of from the inside out. Yeah. So,
That's
Yeah.
great, Derek. Travis, one of
Yeah.
the key points, one of the key pillars here is the operations piece. Would you like to speak to a little bit about, how that plays out, what matters when it comes to, boots on the ground, hands on the keyboards?
Yeah. Duncan, anytime anyone asks me if I want to speak about operations, you can guarantee it's a yes. All right. So yeah, hell yeah, I do. What I'll say is organizations can usually point to their budget to register their security stack, their business continuity stack. where do they point to ensure that they are appropriately investing in their discipline, the operational discipline, the muscle memory, so that when that event does occur, their teams could do what they need to do without overthinking it, without hitting too much challenge along the way. One of the things that way I've heard it said before, and I like it because it becomes clear, is it's a balance of tech and discipline. Um,
Yeah.
but the tech is the ceiling, right? The tech that you have is the best you will ever do. But the reality is, when you go to invoke an event, you're operating through an event, the discipline, the muscle memory, the practice that you have will determine how close to that ceiling you can get, right? So the tech is the ceiling, but how well you can actually execute that is gradients in between. Um, I've seen companies that have best in class technical stacks, and they
Yeah.
completely fall apart during an incident because nobody had run the drill. Nobody had done the tabletop exercises. The tools don't fail typically. It's the process, the people, the ambiguity, the lack of clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. Great insight. Great insight there. We can go to the next slide, please. So, we've titled this slide "Resilience Assumes Breach," and we're going to talk about these things, but from a traditional security point, uh, keeps threats out. Perimeter first mindset is always the way we want to think about these things. Firewall as the last line of defense. When I started in the business, and I think Travis can probably echo this. Um, the firewall was the key point.
Mhm.
That the world has changed so much, and technology, has come so far that really we've pushed the firewall down to the last line of defense in this regard, with so much other things to stack on top to create this cyber resilient infrastructure. Reactive response to incidents, again, that the people and the operational piece that is so important, and then recovery treated as an afterthought. That's the traditional way of thinking about these things. Derek, can you go through with us with regards to cyber resilience? What are we looking at now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, and kind of just to touch a little bit more on the traditional security side first, because I want to make a clear distinction, right? So,
Yeah,
we see the slide as, resilience assumes breach, and it kind of lends back to the previous slide. We don't have to go back to it, but just that assumption of breach and what we're going to do in the event of a breach or in the event of a data security issue or just a data security incident in general. That's what makes you cyber resilient. That mindset of, okay, this is going to happen. How will we react and how will we keep the business going as we're containing and then eradicating that threat, whatever that may be? And so that's the traditional security mindset, where resiliency isn't expected. Traditional security is we are going to be the most secure, top tech, and nothing bad is going to happen to us. And that's why you see the perimeter first mindset of firewalls. We'll just keep the bad guys out. We're not even worried about that. As long as we keep the bad guys out, we keep the good entities internally, we'll be all right. And we just find that with that mindset or with that technical configuration of bad guys out, everything that's inside is good. Really, these incidents have more of a reactive response where something happens to us and now we got to get on our toes and scramble and figure out what we're going to do because we hadn't prepared for this issue, right? We were supposed to keep the bad guys out and that was all that was ever going to happen. With the resilient mindset, it's really recovery is no longer that afterthought, and recovery and business continuity are something that we plan for every day. Of course, we're still going to be top technical. Of course, we're still going to keep security first, but there will be something bad happening, and that's really the main difference between a major breach and just a quick communication that, hey, there was an incident and it's been resolved. Really, the only difference is we're planning for recovery, we're planning for business continuity, and we'll ensure that we're going to be cyber resilient. And so, we can really get really technical and really into the weeds and talk about what, specific details on what you should do and what you shouldn't do, but it really all starts with the mindset, right? This is going to happen. How are we going to plan for it? And we'll move on from there. We'll build that environment from the foundation up. So I really do want to stress the mindset and planning for things to happen and how we're going to keep going. So I hope I kind of touched on that enough that it was not too technical. Travis, did you have anything you wanted to add about that, transition into from a security focused mindset to a cyber resilient mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I mean, if I were to break it down to the phases, it's, assume breach, limit the blast radius, and detection and response, those sensors is your new perimeter, right?
Yeah.
And so if I break that down, assuming breach, it kind of reorients where you invest your energy. Again, those walls, that perimeter that you were speaking about doesn't exist anymore. The
Right.
perimeter is now detection, it's containment, and it's how quickly you can recover in the event that you need to. The blast radius decision and design decision is an architectural decision early on. It breaks down to, how effective, how isolated is your segmentation? Are you truly using the least privileges that you need to along the way? Do you have appropriate identity tools and controls to make sure that, if you do have an event, if there is something that occurs, that you can, not only identify it quickly, but isolate it immediately as well. There's a phrase that I heard someone say. It says, detection without containment is just expensive logging, which I
Yeah.
kind of love. And it's
Yeah.
absolutely true, right? But the reality is, if your customers are finding out about a breach before you do, that's not a security failure. That's an operations failure. That's an observability failure. That's a tool failure. That's a process failure. And so what matters most is that you need to identify it, and you need to isolate it, you need to reduce and minimize that blast radius along the way. If I go down to a practical set of technical use case that we see this being done effectively using appropriate tools is east-west controls at the workload level. Not at
Yeah.
the network edge level, right? It's actually at the workload level. We see customers do this today with NSX microsegmentation, right? And this it's a very mature architecture, but it's a really, really, really great way to naturally, logically minimize that blast radius and use that technology to support you on that complex journey.
No, that's great, Travis. And speaking of the technology involved, as we, as Lightedge is really partnering with Broadcom, and we've brought to market VCF 9, we want to keep a couple of things about that technology in mind with regards to cyber resiliency. Those include hardened platform controls built into the platform, continuous security compliance monitoring via VCF operations, so that you know when events are happening, an isolated clean room cyber recovery with VMware Live Recovery. So when those events do happen, you have a isolated clean room space to investigate and really understand what's happening. And then that fourth pillar is data layer resilience via DSM-9 .0. So all of those things are built into the VMware VCF package, and really move the needle as far as tooling is concerned, and setting your team up for success from an operations point of view as well. Now, I mentioned the technology, but really, I think what you're going to see here is we discuss further is a holistic view of
Mhm.
cyber resilience, and what that all means. If we could go to the next slide, please. We've got this great kind of picture here, and really we've broken this out from the inside out, starting with your critical assets and data at that centerpiece. Wrapped around that is endpoint protection, duo or is any kind of multi-factor authentication. MFA is so important to make sure that you have the right people getting access to the right things at the right time. Your network and access management is the layer around that. Segmentation via IDS or IPS, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems. And then that final layer, as we mentioned, the web application firewall, what we call WAF, to protect your web application. And then, of course, a managed firewall to really keep out bad actors from the overall surface area, attack area of your platform, of your solution. So we can go on to the next one, please. So let's talk about hybrid infrastructure, the new perimeter. Such an important thing. Derek, I'm gonna lay out some of the challenges here, and I'm gonna let you and Travis speak to how we look at these and how we interact with these challenges. In particular, inconsistent security policies across the environment. Not really a combined good idea of what our security policies are from one end of the business to the other. This could be something as simple as just not doing the due diligence there, or
Yeah.
it could be something. One of the things I see now is developers using their own tools to augment their work and to help them out. Are those tools approved? Do those tools create a security balance there, or are they a detractor from your security posture? Identity and access gaps, when we identify those, they can really prevent or present a clear problem as workloads span across multiple platforms in a hybrid infrastructure. It's so important to keep a good holistic view of what that looks like with your identity and access controls. SLA mismatches create blind spots in the recovery planning. Travis mentioned this a little bit. We'll go into it more, but really understanding what your SLA means, what it covers, and what it doesn't cover. And then attack surface expands with every new integration. We've all come across this as a business grows, as we bring in new things and new ways to do the work. You're just expanding out your infrastructure and the attack surface that goes along with it. Derek, go ahead and talk about how the perimeter has shifted for us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the perimeter has shifted and kind of with a lot of the challenges that Duncan laid out, feeding back to that earlier slide, we talked about what cyber resilience is, right? And it's business continuity plus security plus discipline. You'll even see a lot of those challenges. It actually comes from, in a way, a lack of discipline, right? The inconsistent policies. That's like when things aren't being documented. Discipline it needs to rear its head in every aspect of an organization. And I mean, even in how the perimeter shifted, we'll find that there are a lot of issues or challenges that have arisen, from a lack of discipline in how data, how security, or how identities are secured or how they're identified, right? And so with this shift of the perimeter, really what that means is traditional security says firewall is the perimeter, keep everything out and keep all the good things in. Again, I'm going to continue to drive that home. That was the previous perimeter. But now with hybrid infrastructures, with hyperscale, identities and data are everywhere. And anywhere that your identity and your data is now has to be protected as if it is a perimeter, right? That there has to be a line of defense on the exterior of it and on the interior of it, so that we can contain, threats or data exfiltration, et cetera, from every aspect, from every perspective. And so in hybrid environments, again, we see that the perimeter is the identity, your users. It's not just your critical assets anymore. It's not just your workloads. It's your users, your identities, how you're authenticating. That's why we saw that dual multi-factor authentication. We see a lot of movement to pass keys or phishing resistant MFA. Now the identity is the perimeter, right? It's not just that firewall. The policy is the perimeter, because if you have disciplined, documented, and well-written policies and they're being followed in your processes, you'll be able to contain, eradicate, and also identify where all your critical assets are at every period in time, right? So again, wherever your data lives, wherever it moves, that's your perimeter, whether it's externally on a web browser, whether it's in your data center physically, or if it's even on your laptop. That's all the perimeter. Everyone's hybrid now. People are traveling while they work. That laptop that contains all that sensitive information now has to be treated as a perimeter. And so, with that huge shift, we've really seen a lot more emphasis placed on a zero trust architecture, where you trust nothing. You basically verify everything. You verify every aspect, anything that has access to, that either stores critical assets or has access to those critical assets. And I think the zero trust architecture, of course, it's not a be all end all. And of course, it's not a linear progression. It's not just, okay, well, today we're not zero trust, and tomorrow we will be. It's always going to be kind of an ebb and flow, right? It's a place we want to get, right? But if we follow those frameworks with the zero trust architecture, you'll find that being able to identify and then secure the perimeter and your identity as they move, it does make it a bit easier from an organizational standpoint. And so I kind of want to segue that over to Travis. He may be able to kind of expand on what zero trust in practice looks like and how we can help your organization get to that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is zero trust is very, very easy. You just can
Mhm.
go online and next day order it and then it's in
Yeah.
your mailbox the next day and boom, you have zero
Right
trust.
off Amazon, right? Yeah.
We
It's that
wished.
easy,
We
For
man.
sure.
wished.
Just prime it over. No. So actually, it's a journey, right? As you might have expected for me to say. It's absolutely not a technology solution or a product that you buy. It's an architectural decision, an architectural journey that you design intentionally and then you operationalize over time. What I will say is, and why I make that joke is most organizations buy the technologies and they skip the second part. They skip the discipline, they skip the materialization of it and what it takes to become real and make that a core piece of their business. When I break down the core elements of a successful, effective zero trust architecture, it's a lot of things that Derek's already mentioned. Identity, I'm verifying everything all the time, right? Device health, I know who my fleet is, I know what my fleet is, and absolutely I'm able to know what's happening at all times. Blast radius, that micro segmentation, ensuring that we know that if there were an event, if there was traffic that goes, east, west, and beyond, that we know where it can go should it go wrong. And then validating along the way and encrypting along the way are obvious things. Again, you'd be surprised how often that obvious things aren't always so obvious. So, and going back to the journey itself, there's all sorts of ways to approach it, but I generally see it done most commonly in three key phases. First is the identity phase, really establishing your identity ecosystem, your tools, your processes, your roles. And then, of course, in MFA, just establishing all of that least access as possible, conditional access. Second, we see the device posture piece, understanding where the devices are, which platforms they're on, which data is on them, which types of data is on them and who has access to all of that. And the third phase, which is a tough phase, is that workload segmentation. I mentioned east-west controls, I mentioned logical isolation, but it can come down to app layer policies, service accounts, role-based elements. But really, this is the blast radius piece to make sure, from an architectural point of view, that the risk is mitigated should there be an event. One of the pressure tests that I'll often run against a customer when we're talking about zero trust is I'll ask them a basic question is does your security model on your internal workloads assume that your users are on your network? And if that's an assumption, if that's a core requirement, then you have a lot of work to do to build a zero trust, a
Yeah.
zero trust architecture, right? You need to start that journey.
It's a mindset shift, Travis. It's so true. And VMware has really given us several tools to deal with these. In particular, VCF9 improves resilience across infrastructure, workloads, and recovery operations. For platform ops, one of the operating models for security, visibility, compliance, and recovery orchestration. For regulated industries, it's a stronger fit for organizations needing data sovereignty, auditability, and on-prem recovery options. And then for app and data teams, VCF9 adds a resilience at the database layer with backups, patching, governance, and recovery controls. And the point that we're trying to get across here, and that we'll continue to make throughout this webinar, is there's no silver bullet. It's all of these things working together. To say that we want to microsegment or go zero trust is great when we say it out loud. In practice, it's a dynamic mind shift. So it's something that you have to work with on your teams. And we've all had challenges in our careers around these things, depending on what time in our careers those things happen and how we learned and built upon those failures in the past. If we could go to the next slide, please. So resilience is an operational discipline, and I love this because it's such a key component here. And one of the things that we really, as the service provider, have to partner with our customers on. It's not something that we can just do out of the box. But it is something that we definitely partner with customers on. Travis, could you kind of take us through some of these items and talk, really get into what operational discipline means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the workloads that we have, the IT solutions that we build, We don't build them just because we like to build cool stuff, but it is a factor. We do like to build cool stuff. But the reality is we build them because they support business needs, right? And so the question that I'll often ask somebody is, okay, this is great. This is a cool technology. This is a great solution. What does it mean to the business and who are the business stakeholders? And so taking that lens and then taking it a step farther in terms of, say, RTO and RPO, that is a contractual commitment to a business. And this is saying, hey, this is how quickly we can recover you. This is how much data may be, lost in that process. But more often what we see is a decision is made early on. It's tucked away in a spreadsheet or in an SOW somewhere, and it's not revisited on a regular basis. Ensuring that the business that workload is supporting is aware of what that means is very, very critical. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if I break it down, right, there's different types of recovery. There's different scenarios where you would need to do, some basic recovery. If I talk about hardware failure, that is a event occurred and I need to get something back up quickly. It's a pretty crisp situation. On the opposite end of that spectrum, there's a security recovery. An event happened. I need to recover. I need to fail over, but I don't know at what stage of my data I can trust, right? And so when you ask your team what is RTO or what the RTO target is, ask them, what's the target? And if they give you a binary answer, the reality is they've built an answer around more than one scenario, and those scenarios are not going to be the same. There's two very, very, very different recovery problems and challenges, and most organizations don't have the answer to both. Um, Next piece that I'll cover is specifically talking about tabletop exercises. This goes back to the discipline. This is back to that muscle memory so that when you are in that incident room, in that fog of war, in that complex situation where you got 20 people that you don't normally work with looking over your shoulder and saying, what's next? What's next? What's happening? What do we do? How bad is it? It's just giving the team the confidence and the comfort to go into there with some form of muscle memory, some confidence, and be able to do it effectively. When I look at the elements and the goals of an effective tabletop exercise, right? The goal is not to build the perfect plan. The goal is not to build a step by step by step by step by step by step thing. That is a good foundation. It is a good place to start. But the real intent of a tabletop exercise is to find the gaps. When an adversary is doing its thing, doing their thing, they are banking on creating chaos. That's going to be their home field advantage is to create the chaos. And so you will never build a step-by-step checklist that prepares you for that chaos that bad actor may choose to introduce. But what you can do is you can do it iteratively. You can understand the gaps. You could build a robust plan, and you can really, really make sure that you understand who has the authority to make these decisions, right? What are assumptions that we haven't tested? What are some communication breakdowns that we need to be aware of? And so it really, really does a great job raising that. Another thing that I'll say on the fun side is we do tabletop exercises internally all the time. And
Mhm.
giving your team the opportunity to operate as the red team is it's malicious. It's terrible. Like my team of great engineers and architects, they just become menaces all of a sudden,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so they get to go in and be that bad actor and say and throw all these curveballs, and it's fun for them. But again, it's nothing a bad actor isn't going to do to us in a non-shared situation. And so when I look at the investment, when I look at what's required, we've talked about the investment of security tools, BCP, right? But the discipline itself, again, a tabletop exercise costs you half a day, 3 hours
Yeah.
maybe some uncomfortable conversations. A breach with no playbook, I guarantee you is going to cost a heck of a lot more than that.
It reminds me of my old army days where we trained for hitting the enemy, and you train it and you train it and you train it so that when that first contact occurs, you know exactly what to do. You don't even have to think about it. That's a great advice here, Travis. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. So building your cyber resilience roadmap. Let's talk about this. I'm going to take the assess box, and then I'm going to let Derek and Travis speak to the other two. But really, when we're talking about your roadmap around cyber resiliency, we want to identify what is the thing that we're protecting. What are the crown jewels? What are those critical workloads? As Travis pointed out, we need to define what our RTO is, what our RPO is, as thoughtful business decisions. What is it going to take to get us back online? What are we okay with? What are we not okay with? What is unacceptable? And then how do we meet those goals? We're going to map your current environment against the requirements that you have for your solution. And then finally, we're good. We want to look and find those gaps before the attacker does. We want to understand, what are our good things? What are our things we really have to keep a good eye on and understand that, holistically across the entire organization, so that when something does happen, we know where to look, we know where to go to. Derek, carry on from what I've kind of laid out here, and let's talk about the design piece.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Duncan. And I actually want to give kudos to the team because this is my favorite slide out of the entire PowerPoint. A lot of, what we've been talking about has been at a high level of what, organizations need to do to be cyber resilient. And I love this
Derek, you,
roadmap.
you say that to all your slides, man. I've heard you say
No,
that to all your slides.
I do say that to all my slides, but this is actually my favorite one. I mean it. I love it because it shows the roadmap, right? And it shows that regardless of where your organization is at, we kind of give a play-by-play on exactly how to get to a cyber resilient destination. So I love it. I think this is perfectly encapsulated, and I think the design aspect, it's not just center it's not just in the center for no reason. I think it's there because this is a pivotal point of that roadmap, right? The design aspect. So like Duncan mentioned, after you've assessed, you've validated, I mean, you've assessed and you've identified those workloads and what you want to protect and the business obligation that you have, this design piece is where you are going to implement the resilient mindset into each discipline or into each
Yeah,
domain, right? So whether it's that software domain, that platform area, or the operations, the design point is where you kind of are like, okay, we're going to be resilient and this is how we're going to design it, this is how we're going to set it up in the event of a breach or an incident, whatever the case may be. What does that look like? What does resilience mean in software and applications? It means ensuring that your backups are immutable and that they're tested, right? It means
yeah,
network segmentation and zero trust access. What does that mean? Really, really technical jargon. What it means is that in the event that, for example, an identity is compromised, if we have a zero trust architecture, there are going to be strict restraints and controls on what a bad actor can do, even after they get access into your environment, right? This is the resilient mindset, that design mindset where we're building into resiliency. We're saying, okay, again, not if something's going to happen, but when it happens, how can we be resilient and ensure that we're going to contain this incident as best as possible? Documentation on those incident response playbooks, documentation on backup and recovery, all of those points, all of those things that you document, the table talks, the exercises you're doing, that's all that design phase, right? We've assessed everything. We know what we need to protect. Now we're going to figure out how we're going to protect it. So I love it. This is kind of that action period in the cyber resilience roadmap and in that journey. So, definitely my favorite part of the build. And I think it's the most fun too, because I think it's where you learn where your gaps are and how you're going to kind of fill those gaps and plug them. So I love it.
absolutely,
So
Derek.
yeah, so kind of transitioning from the design. Now we get back to kind of what Travis mentioned earlier about testing your backups, validation, et cetera. So Travis, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of it's been said, the tabletops, the red teams, testing the backups to make sure they do what you expect them to do. And, realizing that validation is an ongoing activity. It's not a one and done situation. But, if I were to recap and rephrase anything, I would say that it's important that you build for the scenario and not build a checklist. Checklist is important, but that's not why we do it, right? We do it for the scenario, we do it for the practice. Again, a bad actor intentionally introduces chaos. What if your out-of-band communication goes down, right? What if your core credentials are compromised? What if key personnel are not available to make those decisions, right? A plan is only as good as it's been practiced. What does it say? How does it go? A plan is that's never been tested is a hypothesis, not a
That's
plan.
right.
All right. And
That's
so
right.
I think you have to make sure you put it into practice. One thing that's not noted here, but it's been important for me as I've gone through observations and it's worth calling out is not only is the scenario important and the checklist is important and the practice is important, but also the autonomy and the authority for your team and the confidence that's
Right.
required to get there. In a real incident, your CISO may not be available, right? Who knows, right? Your CEO may be in the air, may not have access to the interwebs, right? And so, ensuring that the decision making is pre-delegated, ensuring that your team knows exactly what they're authorized to do at 2 a.m. When they can't get in touch with who they need to make a decision is a very important thing. Again, chaos is the adversary's home field advantage. Preparation, that pre-delegation of authority is one of the ways that you could take that away from them. Every IR plan looks great until you ask one question in the middle of it. Who has the authority to say go, to say no go, or to pull the plug completely? If that
Yeah.
answer takes 5, 10 seconds for the team to answer, or your team looks left and right for look and see who's going to make that answer, then you clearly have a gap in your situation. But you cannot script every scenario. But at some point, you need to build a team with enough reps, enough comfort, enough confidence that they can handle the gaps in between what the playbook maybe does not cover.
Yeah, that's so critical, Travis, and well said. It reminds me of a time in my career where we had a customer that we were helping that was under heavy denial of service attack, dedicated denial of service attack, what we call DDoS, and that customer had been down for a day by the time it came across my desk, and the reason it took so long to mitigate is because there was nobody to make the final decision. Yes, we want to do this, or no, that we don't. The CEO I was speaking to said, I'm at a loss. My business is down. What can you do? I was able to clearly say, look, we've got a product. It'll take 15 minutes to learn the traffic patterns of this denial of service attack, and you'll instantly see your good traffic return. He made the decision right there and then. 15 minutes later, he's back up and online. And we could have gotten that done so much sooner and so much easier if we had put in place exactly what Travis is speaking about, which is at every level, empowering your team members to make the right decision when it matters most. So great stuff there, Travis. Appreciate that. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. So that's the main thrust of our presentation today. We've covered a lot of things, but I think one of the key takeaways from this webinar is really cyber resiliency is there's no silver bullet. It's a holistic view of your approach from start to finish, from platform to software to your attack area. It's the way that your operations team reacts to those events and the planning that goes into empowering them to make the right decision in that moment. So I do have a question we want to start with. Travis, this one's for you. Here at Lightedge, do we utilize the VMware tool NSX today? And how do we go about that?
We do. So, we've got many different types of VMware offerings that we support our customers with, from dedicated vCenter to multi-tenant vCenter, right? And we have customers have a very opinionated way they deploy that within their dedicated vCenters. And we also deploy it across our multi-tenant environments as well, not only for how our customers can leverage their networks, but how we manage their networks across that multi-tenant environment. It gives us a bit of a hyper-converged sort of single pane of glass for our VMware engineers to provide that end-to-end experience. So absolutely something that we use today, something I've been using for many years as well to make our
Yeah.
lives easier.
Absolutely. It's a great part of that platform and what VMware's done there is really awesome from a functionality and feature point of view. We've got another one here. What does a realistic timeline look like to go from no cyber resilience plan to a fully operational and tested one? Great question. Travis, you wanna hit that? What does that look like to you?
Yeah. So just start, right? It's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, piece
You
by
know,
piece.
yeah, I think understanding where your crown jewels are. I think Derek said that, right? Understanding where your business IP is, where the things that make you special and also a target, where all that exists is important. From there, once you understand where the important things exist, I would also understand how quickly can you identify when that's exceptionally accessed or general behaviors are abnormal. So look for anomaly or access detection. And then from there, I think that a high level, early, like preemptive sort of tabletop is appropriate, and it's going to be messy. But saying,
Yeah.
hey guys, we don't have a plan. We don't have the right tools. We don't even know what we don't know.
Mhm.
But if this happened today, let's create an incident plan. Let's walk through it and let's see how messy it is. And you want the crap to be scared out of you, do that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if you can't get budget before then, you can get budget from your board after that. I promise you that. Um,
Great tool for that.
yeah, that's right. That's right. But that's where I would start is just the documenting, inventorying, assessing, mocking, and really kind of establishing your pucker factor.
Yeah, and to answer the question a little bit more pointedly, it's different for every organization. It's really taking the things that Travis just laid out and activating on those things. First, let's understand what our situation looks like. Let's understand what are the actions that we're going to take if something happens, and let's understand what can we live with and what we can't we live with. It all starts with that RTO RPO question, and then really you could build upon there. If you're, if you have a small attack surface area, finely tuned team, these can happen pretty quickly, a number of weeks. If you've got a larger organization, something like what we deal with at Lightedge, well, it's gonna take you some time. It's gonna take your team members kicking in and everybody working together, and that can take longer. That can take months. It should not take years. You should be able to activate and do these exercises and do these things in a meaningful amount of time to reduce that attack vector, but also really get that cyber resiliency plan not only created, but get it out there to your teams. Have them understand what the plan is and what their actions are when that plan gets kicked off. So that's a great question. Thanks for that one. We've got another one here. How do compliance frameworks like SOC 2 or HIPAA relate to cyber resiliency? Great question. Derek, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, yeah, I'll take it. I think this is an amazing question. And throughout the PowerPoint, we saw a lot of mention of zero trust. That's another framework, right? But
Yeah.
all of these frameworks, they all play a role, right? And they actually also differ depending on what your industry is, which ones you kind of adhere to and which you don't. But you really can't go wrong, right? SOC 2, HIPAA, NIST, CIS, zero trust, all frameworks that are designed for a secure, but also in certain aspects, a cyber resilient platform or environment. So they can't hurt. And you'll also find that a lot of them do have overlap. And, that's for
Yeah.
a reason. So I think they do a great job touching on the business continuity side. I think they do a great job touching on the security side. And I think that if you can follow them and you can understand that's the journey, that's where we want to get to, you could never go wrong. It'll never hurt you by being SOC 2 compliant or being HIPAA compliant. The only thing I would mention is that, again, these frameworks, they push business continuity and they push security. The discipline, I think, that aspect, the documentation aspect, the understanding of who do we contact in these scenarios, that I think is where what Travis mentioned, where the tabletop exercises are pivotal because a framework can't verify that your organization is pushing that discipline, pushing that training, and people know who and where to access and who to call in certain events. So I think that they're just those frameworks are just another piece to the puzzle. They never hurt, but no one framework or no one control is the full picture. So use them as valuable as they are. Just understand that that discipline aspect has to come internally. It has to be a mindset, pushed down from the organization. So I
Yeah,
hope I
I
Derek.
would
answered that. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Go ahead, Travis. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Oh, no, just real quick, at the beginning of this conversation, I mentioned that the technical design is the ceiling, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I've heard it also said in parallel that the compliance requirements or standards that you're bound to is the floor,
Exactly.
right?
right,
And so,
right.
so I mean, how you build it up on top of that, but that's the base capability that you need.
And so I think, if you don't feeding back to the earlier question, if you have no cyber resilience plan, I think those frameworks should be your guiding star and they should be the starting point, right? And then you build
Yeah,
on
they
top of
can
that.
be.
So those questions kind of align with each other and they're both great. So yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I would layer on top of this is if you're going for a SOC 2 compliance standard, if you're going for a HIPAA compliance standard, that's related to an industry, that's related to a business function. Those things are key and critical to those industries. However, I see a lot of customers, I've been in organizations that have done themselves, that they're working towards the audit, not towards what we're trying to get, which is
Mhm.
a real clear understanding of what those controls are checking. Yeah, you need to pass your audit. That's
Of
important,
course.
but you need to understand why those controls are being audited, why those controls are in the compliance standards, because what they're doing is just hardening your systems to make sure that you're conducting your business in a legal and compliant fashion. And so, like Derek and Trav said, those are starting points. They're certainly not the total holistic view of your cyber resilience program.
Hmm.
Great question on that one. I've got another question. The questions are coming great. Appreciate the kick in here, but this is a long one, so I'm going to read for a minute, and we'll let you guys come in after. So, in a previous role, I dealt with a plan using recovery that was all or nothing, with a secondary data center that was essentially kept dark. The thinking being that recovery of core platform services would be more operationally straightforward in the event of a disaster. This precluded recovery of individual business applications. When a event occurred, our org was forced with a decision of failing forward, which could have taken weeks for non-critical app, or waiting for the fire marshal to allow us back in the data center. What would be your advice to architects faced with traditional DR setup like this? How can the risk be communicated to management without being labeled chicken little? Great question. Travis, what do you think on this?
I don't
I know
want to
you've
answer
got
that one,
experience
man. That's a
on this
hard
one.
one to answer. Oh man, that's a complex challenge, but it is a real challenge.
It
Um,
is.
when I think about that, just from off the cuff, is anytime you could tier RTO and RPO by say application, their business criticality, and separating it to where it's not a monolithic solution, there's always value in that. That affords you the capability of um, you know, how do I say this? And so what I've seen organizations do unintentionally is take their organization and design an architecture around that organization. Um, and I think that, the modern way of looking at that is not designing an architecture for an organization, it's identifying your workloads and designing micro architectures for each of those workloads. Um,
Critical. Yeah.
yeah, and that gives you that ability to have that more of a granular failover, that business stakeholder decision maker rather than a board or CEO all or nothing situation.
Mhm.
I think another thing that I see done well sometimes, and I'm a fan of it, is if I could when I look at DR, I see two locations that I'm paying for, and I see one that I'm using and one that I'm not. I would love to get to the point to where I could have true active-active sites, right? That's like the nirvana. That's a hard thing to do, but maybe that happy medium is if you have that true workload level architecture, then what you could do is say, I'm going to split my traffic 50-50 and have these workloads active in this site, these workloads active in this site, and they could fail any which way in between. That's a really, really, really cool way of doing it because it proves you got the capability. You're moving
Yeah.
workloads from region to region, so the muscle memory is there. And it's just a good return on your investment as well.
It's also important. That's great, Travis. Thanks for that. It's also important to understand crazy stuff happens in this world. Travis and I used to work for another company. We won't mention their name, but we had a situation where we had a fiber line cut, so our networking gets cut to the data center. At that point, all of us were all hands on deck. Not that we could fix that fiber cut, but to relay to our customers affected what our plan was, what we were doing, how long they could expect their sites to be down. We activated as a team, and there were lots of us. Travis was working on the Linux side of the house. I was working on the Windows side of the house, but we were all activating to get those customers in the know as quickly as possible on a really bad day. And if all things, could not be worse in that situation, then we had a horrible situation where a gentleman was driving his truck near the data center, has a diabetic incident, and runs into the main power supply for the data center. So not only are we dealing with a networking issue, we're also now dealing with our power being cut as well. Had we all not been privy to a plan, understand what we needed to do in that moment, we could have had one of those really big down events that makes the news, and there's a really bad story for our customers attached to it. In that situation, that's not what happened. Because we were already in the mix, because we had a plan of action, because we were doing all of the things that we could while these things got fixed and mitigated, it really changed that story around to one where our customers appreciated what we were doing. They appreciated the fact that we were open and honest and upfront, giving, sometimes an update every 30 minutes as soon as we got a piece of information that was shared. So that's all part of it. And we've gone through that, at every step and every slide. But it's critical to understand your team needs to know what's going on, what their job is when those things happen, and they need to activate and really shine and put in that heroic effort when those things come up.
Hey
It
Duncan, do
really
you
makes
remember
the
the most effective element of that BCP? It was
tell me.
the
Yeah.
CEO walking up and down the aisles with a red wagon full of homemade cookies that his wife had made and Red Bulls.
Absolutely. Yeah, just the CEO of our company taking care of us and making sure we were cool because we were taking care of our customers. I love those stories like that, and I don't hear them enough anymore. We get bogged down in our day-to-day work, but these things matter, and it's a critical part of your cyber resiliency plan. Well, that's all the questions I've got. I'll take a moment just to pause if anybody's got anything else that we can answer for them. Otherwise, I think this has been a great discussion, guys. I appreciate you both and your expertise. Derek, it's great working with you from a security point of view, and Travis, always lovely working with you from the operations side. So we want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I appreciate all the great questions that we got. And look, if you're looking to firm up your cyber resiliency plan, engage us. Talk to Lightedge. We're here to help you and make that a winning story and not a worst day for you. So I want to thank everybody again for your participation here, and we'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.